Can I start? Yeah,
Yep, go for
right.
it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yes, thank you for this nice and kind introduction, Pete. Um, my research is focusing mainly on anthropology of technology, also connected to robot ethics. And I'm also doing a lot of research on religious technologies, for example, religious robots. Today, I want to talk with you about death technology, death bots, grief bots. So I'm trying to explore ethical perspectives on death technology. I would like to so first I would like to talk about what is death technology. Then I would like to present three perspectives from Christian ethics, and then make a short evaluation and discussion with you. I should mention that this talk is based on a paper primarily aimed at a broader audience, so particularly also people in engineering, computer science, and business, so not only theologians. So therefore, the theological argumentation here does not go very deep, but instead aims to explain what a Christian perspectives might look like in more accessible terms. And yeah, I still wanted to bring this topic to the talk to open it up for discussion with you and to discuss it together with you. Um, one issue is that the realm of death belonged to religions for a long time, but is now increasingly being taken over by companies with death technology. Therefore, I would like to ask, how can religions re-engage and contribute? So what is death technology? Death technology broadly refers to technologies related to the topic of death. So these could be a wide range of tools, apps, logistical organizational tasks related to death, various aspects of the grieving process. But here I would like to focus on the so-called death bots. In the current discourse, these technologies are there are many different interchangeable names. So dead bots, grief bots, ghost bots, posthumous avatar, digital versions. And death bots are AI, so I will just call them death bots here, AI-enabled digital representations of deceased individuals. They are typically created using audio, text, and video material from a person's lifetime, so that relatives or others could engage in seemingly real-time conversations with the digital version of the deceased. They can feel very lifelike, often creating a powerful emotional impact. They are not like old video recordings or static memorials. They can generate autonomous responses, so they can even discuss topics the deceased never explicitly addressed during their lifetime. So we already know that collages, diaries, notes, we have very valuable memories from our deceased ones, and also today's smartphones are filled with a wealth of videos, voice messages, and photos. However, with this new technology, the death technology, this form of remembrance has reached a new level. So it's not only preserving static image or recorded message, but it's an interactive avatar we could engage with. So it's not like Bell and Bray called it, it's not a one-way immortality anymore, it's a two-way immortality. And there's a massive digital afterlife industry emerging now, primarily driven by the United States, South Korea, and China. Yeah, so it's very likely that these death technologies will play a significant role in our life in the coming years. Here are just a few examples. So there's this famous example of how ChatGPT, the GPT-3 version, was used for how Joshua used it to develop a chatbot based on his deceased girlfriend. There's also the app Storyfile, which enables recording of personalized stories. So you can just respond to a series of questions about your life while being filmed, and afterwards, yeah, your loved ones can engage with you as an AI-powered avatar based on these questions. There's also here after AI, and also Amazon announced also already into 2022 at a conference that Alexa would be able to speak in the voice of the deceased. So the promotion materials of Amazon showcase a scenario in which a deceased grandmother reads a book to her grandchild before bedtime. And there are many new startups also regarding metaverse emerging. Important from a Christian ethical perspective is that death technology does not promise immortality in the literal sense. So it's just a digital representation, a continued existence of a digital representation. So technically, it's compatible with a Christian perspective as well. Sorry, I will skip this. Okay. Now I would like to introduce some Christian ethical perspectives on death technology. First, Christian conceptions of death. What happened to heaven? So there's not a single universally accepted Christian definition or doctrine regarding death or the afterlife. Also, the conceptions are very vague, so we don't have a very concrete understanding what's happening after death. Also, the conceptions of death are likely to evolve. So they change over the time, and it's very likely that also this technology might change how we understand the afterlife. Heaven is, of course, not understood as a physical location in the sky or a concrete place, but it's rather a eschatological dynamic event of encounter, how Hegel called it. It's a relational space of communion between humans and between humans and God. It stands for the transcendence of God. It's a symbol of hope. It's a hope for salvation and communion. So deathbots are not direct competitors to Christian conceptions of the afterlife, as they do not truly aim to address life beyond death itself. But of course, these technologies, they challenge the once sharply drawn boundary between life and death, and they have the potential to shape emerging ideas of the afterlife. So, for example, concepts of a more localized and digital and mediated hereafter. From this perspective, one could argue that the developers of death tech are, in a sense, reinventing the afterlife. It's also possible, so why I talk about digital afterlife is that it's possible to imagine a future in which after uploading, for example, a grandmother to a digital platform, one might also upload the deceased grandfather so they can be together, of course, and followed by the dog and their rocking chair, then their daily newspaper or their coffee mugs. So there could also be this scenario where we would upload more and more avatars and create a afterlife, because we wouldn't need a separate space for a grandmother or grandfather, for example. So there are a wide range of different ethical questions and challenges. But I will focus only on three key themes, especially relevant from a Christian perspective here. The first one is what was already discussed on conference, the imago Dei, of course, so the idea that the humans being are created in the image of God. We all know that the imago Dei is a highly contested concept, and there are different interpretations. But maybe a minimal consensus from a Christian perspective in the context of deathbots could be that every human being is endowed with dignity and must be protected from instrumentalization. So this dignity applies not only during the lifetime, but also after death. So everyone is, the dead are to be treated with respect and buried with dignity. And this applies to all human beings without exception. So also this one, so people who did any crimes from Christian perspective, this applies to everyone. And deathbots, on the one hand, can offer a very creative space for negotiating and shaping one's identity. So like avatars or personas on social media. On the other hand, they risk reducing the person to a fixed image. a limited version of the individual, because death bots fail to preserve the dynamic character of human identity that is never fully determined or complete. They're always based on data and algorithmic processes, making them fundamentally static. And we have a very large tradition in Christian theology or some practical theology with understanding identity as dynamic, as fragile, fluid, with Henning Luther or with Vera Pirka, for example. So from a Christian perspective, a person cannot be fully captured or represented in data or in digital representation. In addition, the digital version of the deceased can be instrumentalized or misused. For example, by invoking specific statements or thoughts that the person once expressed. So in private context, the avatar could claim that the deceased mother would have wanted her child to attend college. Or in church context, a religious figure who said in the past something against women's role in the church. And these statements made by death bots, even if they were recorded in the past, they are always embedded in specific historical, cultural, contextual frameworks. So they never can be transferred uncritically into the present. So this is the big challenge, I think. We could also ask whether it's instrumentalization to use such an image for the grief process, because it's only that the person here is only reduced to the means for others' emotional needs, so of the loved ones. Yeah, and another important aspect of anthropology and Christian theology is relationality. And if we're looking on relationality from a Christian theological perspective, we are often referring only to human-human relationships and also to human-God relationships. But I also emphasize that theology often overlooks the importance of relationships between humans and nature or humans and technology. So technology can also serve as an important mediator or shaper of human relationships. We can even form relationships with technologies themselves. So in light of this, death technology raises a critical question: do death bots foster human relationships? And since grief is a deeply personal and highly individual experience, death bots may offer a very personal way, an individualized way to say goodbye at their own pace. So because everyone has very special needs. And especially for those who had never the opportunities to say farewell, to say goodbye. For example, because they don't live close to each other, or because this was a very sudden death. Death technology could be an opportunity to say goodbye. But if you look in the research literature, there's way more empirical research and psychological insight needed to understand whether and how interaction with death bots really aids in grieving processing. So in some cases, it might even complicate or even hinder it. So they are very different positions. And another scenario, because we all know that grief is a long, multi-phase process. When is a death bot still a grief bot? So when is when does grief stop? For example, one might also wish to involve a long deceased parent in their wedding after many, many years. Or a grief bot might also be used years later to introduce children to a grandparent they've never met. So here's maybe no grieving anymore if you're introducing, or maybe it's very complicated. I don't want to judge here. The deceased person and the relationships that the bereaved built with them are particularly at risk of being instrumentalized by economic and commercial interests of companies here. So these technologies are often not created with the intention to help, to support grieving, to foster relationships, but it's just a highly profitable market that has emerged. So in other words, it's the very difficulty of letting go of a loved one that becomes economically valuable. The longer a person struggles to let go, the greater the profit potential for the companies. I will shortly introduce two more perspectives: vulnerability and deceptions. So Christian ethics places particularly emphasis on vulnerability, mortality, physical and psychological suffering. So can death bots contribute to a positive relationship with our own vulnerability or mortality? Or are they reinforcing the illusion that we can overcome it with digital means? Then, as I said, death hacks companies exploit human vulnerability. And these technologies also generate new forms of vulnerability. So, for example, in case of death bots, they create strong emotional attachment. And then this also means that the company can charge a higher price, they can make costly upgrades, add supported models, time-limited interactions with the deceased. Yeah, many of you know maybe this Aibo robotic dog example where there have been even funerals for robotic pets when the company discontinued replacement parts. And a Christian theological perspective places particularly emphasis on vulnerable groups in society. For example, children, elderly individuals, people with disabilities, or certain cognitive conditions may struggle to distinguish these bots from real human beings. So this is something that I find crucial with the Amazon example. So in this Amazon example, Alexa is reading a bedtime story to a child using the voice of the child's deceased grandmother. And in this scenario, it's apparent that so it's very likely that the child would not understand that it's not truly the grandmother speaking to them. So this is a clear case of deception. And last perspective is justice. So we all know that in the context of technology ethics, the big justice questions always revolves around access. So who has access to technology? While this remains important, I want to focus here on a different but related question. Which people are being duplicated and reproduced through death bots? Or returning to the Imago Dei, we might ask, whose image is being replicated here? So if we look at the most powerful actors in the tech sector, a very homogeneous group, primarily white men from wealthy global north societies, engineers, we could ask whether this could reinforce a type of neocolonialism, for example, because we always see in the design processes of technology that there are not enough people of color and also people with disabilities, women, queer communities, because we always have a very problematic default human model in these kind of technologies. Also questions of intergenerational justice. So what happens if older people don't leave, but stay there? And also ecological justice and climate justice. So this is for me one of the most important aspects here. Because if we look at the creation, our human responsibility for the co-world, is the value they provide these technologies truly significant enough to justify their ecological cost? So if we look on the production, operation, storage, consume, so the energy, resources, everything that Kate Crawford in her book, the Atlas of AI has showed. So yeah. I would like to discuss with you and to evaluate the opportunities, new possibilities, and challenges. The perspectives that I presented to you, I think they have to be reassessed and always evaluated. So I often wonder, how will people think about it in 20 years when they read my paper then, and the technology has long become commonplace and normalized? So am I too critical? Would they still speak of instrumentalization? So it's similar with social media. today that's so common now. What I find particularly interesting are the AI-generated videos of Pope Francis that circulated after his death. Yeah, so this is also something I would love to discuss with you because these videos seem to involve significantly less instrumentalization. They appear rather harmless, even comforting. For instance, in one of the videos, Jesus turns water into wine and they drink wine together, and Pope Francis meets other deceased individuals, including former popes. However, he's not a bot here. You cannot interact with him. He doesn't even speak. Um, I think this also makes an important difference here. So I like to explore, can we still speak of instrumentalization in such cases? I think also as theologians, we have to have a critical role in society, but we won't stop this technology. It's a very booming industry, and we also have to think how we can shape this technology. And so I would also like to think about new possibility and opportunities this technology might bring. I'm thinking here about religious education and cultural purposes. For example, also the Holocaust holograms of the last living Auschwitz survivors that are also a very incredible good means to preserve memory. Then these technologies could contribute to new approaches to death. So individually to engage with in a very individual way with your own death, but also in society to speak more about death. And maybe deathbots could also be developed in a way to promote a more vibrant culture of mourning. So instead of the cold gravestone, we could look for more interactive and more playful or vibrant, joyful engagement with death. I've prepared a short conclusion, but I think I will skip this here. So I try to make a link to Jürgen Moltmann's Theologie der Hoffnung, Theology of Hope, which is also not only looking at the a localized future afterlife, but it's also looking on ethics and on our lives today. So I think that maybe we can also extend this vision in the context of death technology, allowing us to reimagine this technology.